Welcome to the Rialto Marketing Podcast. Today's episode is a revenue acceleration series interview where we talk to seven-figure B2B business owners and their growth-minded executives who are actively trying to grow their business and get to the next level. We talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you can learn from their experience. Hi, I am Tim Fitzpatrick with Rialto Marketing, where we believe you must remove your revenue roadblocks to accelerate growth, and marketing shouldn't be difficult. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in today. I am super excited to have Jeff Farr with Sarah Bryn with me today. Jeff, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this. You got a wealth of knowledge, ton of experience, so I know that we're going to have a great conversation. Before we jump into that, I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions to get things kicked off. Are you ready to jump in?
Certainly.
Okay. So very quickly, what do you do? How long have you been doing it?
Ooh, what do? I do a lot of stuff. I run, right now, the owner and operator of 3 different businesses. Mainly Sarah Bryn. That comes in lots of flavors. I do a lot of selling. I do a lot of stuff with mergers and acquisitions. I'm still involved in the operational side. So every day's different. It's always a lot of fun. But my primary job is to be sure we know where we're going and we're hitting our objectives.
But what's the most important lesson you've learned in running your businesses? You've run plenty of them.
Yep. When I was a younger man, I used to get really frustrated when I was dealing with people who weren't going at the speed that I wanted them to, or they didn't know what I wanted them to know. And, my father is probably my biggest influence on my life, but certainly in my business life. He and I worked together for almost 13 years. We had a business together, which was phenomenal. But he used to, I'd get cranky or something, and he'd just say, Jeff, he said, you got to work with people where they are, not where you think they need to be. And it is really true. It doesn't matter if it's a customer. It doesn't matter if it's an employee. It doesn't matter if it's a vendor. Being grumpy because they're not where I think they should be or doing what I think they should be doing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When I changed my expectations to work with them where they are, magically things got better.
Yeah. That's such a powerful way of looking at things, right? Because no matter how much we want them to be at a certain place, if they're not there, what can we do to help them get there?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Now, I know you've been running businesses for a long enough period of time, plenty of ups, plenty of downs.
Sure.
Do you have any kind of mantra or motivational saying that you say to yourself, share with your team to push through those times where you're running up against hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that you're going to run into, right? All businesses have ups and downs, like you said. And, if it's more of, hey, we're just not selling the way we should be selling, or people aren't buying, things like that, I think that's a different message, which is, the process works. And so you've got to stick with it. And so sometimes it's about faith, it's about the grind, it's about the activities. If it's more internal, if it's operational, things like that, and we're struggling somehow, then usually it's time to just let's all get together, right? We've somehow lost sight of the end objective, and for whatever reason, we're confused. And so I think once you get everybody back on task, what is the laser focused on whatever that objective is, whether it's that year, that quarter, whatever. And then everything else is fluff. So it just kind of depends on the situation, but you've got to have a way. I kind of think of it like a coach. When, I played a lot of basketball in my days, and, a great coach knows when to stop the team and say, okay, we forget that quarter, forget that pitch, forget that, play, whatever it is. And you got to have some amnesia. Let's get back on the balls of our feet and let's make some stuff happen.
Yeah. So when you talk about focusing on the objective and kind of getting rid of the fluff, what I'm hearing you say is like knowing what the objective is tells you where you need to focus, and everything else can just be disregarded.
Sure.
Am
It's absolutely true. And the reason is, I think, especially in today's world, we try to multitask all day long.
Yeah.
Right. We want to do this, and we need to be, worried about sales. And we need to be making some social media posts, and we need to do marketing, and we're going to have there's always 1,000 things to do. And that's never changed in my, 30 plus years in business. That's never changed.
Yeah.
The problem is you can do a whole bunch of stuff mediocre, or you can narrow it down and do a few things really well.
Yeah.
And another lesson from my dad, a mediocre team that focuses, it'll be better than a bunch of stars that have no real plan and no real objective.
Yeah.
So it's do a few things well, and if you can get to some of the others, great. And that way you always know you're doing the most important things first.
We see that a lot on the marketing side where, having a plan and knowing what your objectives are outlines your priorities, right? And when you have your priorities, you have clarity, stress goes down, but it also eliminates all the distraction. Because like you said, there's so much distraction. And if we don't know what the priorities are, it's easy just to go down this path like a squirrel chasing a nut. And we never get traction that way. And so,
in our marketing efforts, it's the same thing, right? We want to sit down, we want to talk about buyer personas, right? And all the different types of people who can buy, and we want to build those personas really well. Then we want to have that messaging. What are we going to say to each one of them? Then you got to have the channel of how do you get to them? And there's so many ways to get to them now, right? Yeah. And then is it effective? And in marketing, that's the whole thing. I have one of my dearest friends is a professor at SMU in branding and marketing.
Yeah,
named Willie Baronet. And the two things he taught me that taught me a long time ago, and I'm never going to forget them. One, he says, I like to hunt with a grenade, and what I need to do is hunt with a rifle.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just think, throw it all out there and surely we'll get some.
Yeah.
That's ineffective. Number two is 50% of your marketing is ineffective. The problem is you don't know which 50%. So between those two, it's like, okay. And so, that's, it's just true. Whether or not it's effective or not, you got to try it.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, you try something else until you find what works.
Yeah. I constantly talk about the cycle of test, measure, learn.
Absolutely.
Right? You're testing, you figure out what you're going to measure, you measure it, you get the data, you learn from it, and then you just continually iterate, right? Because, and I love that. Thank you for sharing that about, he said 50% of your marketing doesn't work because, too many people go into marketing with unrealistic expectations thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all these things and nothing's working. And it's like, well, yeah, a lot of stuff doesn't work. But it's the stuff that you do that doesn't work helps you get to the place where you figure out what works.
Yeah.
And then you can start to double down.
Early in my career, we hired a marketing firm. We were probably way too unfair for them, and we were inexperienced. And I was like, okay, if I spend X amount of money, and it was, at the time it was $10,000 a month or something. It was not what I considered. 20 years ago, I thought that was a lot of money on marketing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know exactly what we would get for it. And the lady just looked at me and she said, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to reframe your expectations because that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
I can tell you what could happen. I can tell you what typically happens, and then I can tell you how it could go bad.
Yeah.
And to your point, we're going to iterate.
Yeah.
Constant A/B testing. Which one's working better? We're going with that one. Okay, now let's try another one. Which one's working better?
Yeah.
And I had to learn to be patient and look at marketing as an investment, a longer term investment, not a short term. I pay X and I get Y back.
Yeah. There are certainly activities that you do where you can look at it that way, but a lot of it from a higher level, you have to look at it as that long-term investment. It's
Sure.
I think so many people do it for a short period of time and they're like, this isn't working, and then they give up long before they've ever really given it the opportunity to actually start to gain traction and work.
Well, I can tell you this. I've run businesses where we didn't invest very much money at all in marketing. And I've run businesses where we invested in marketing. I can tell you that every time we invested in marketing, whether it was considered a successful or not, we're much more successful than when we didn't.
Yeah.
So it may not be precise, but what I do know is that works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, I know I touched on this. You've run 7 different companies in varying capacities. They all got their own personality. How did you adapt your leadership and your marketing strategies to fit those the unique needs of each of those businesses?
that's a good question. So, a lot of it comes down to the ownership of those businesses and what they value, right? And so when my dad and I had our business, this was when I was much younger, but neither one of us really knew what to expect. So I think we invested very minimally and we received minimal results. But part of that was just comfort, right?
Yeah.
It was overthinking. It wasn't experimenting enough, and it was inexperience, candidly. As some of the other, 2 of the businesses that I ran were private equity backed. Okay, that's a different animal, right?
Yeah.
And they expect returns. Matter of fact, they demand a certain level of return on their investment. If you don't do it, you're not there anymore. And the only way you're going to give that kind of return is if you're growing.
Yeah.
And so you can't grow if you don't market. And so, in that situation, I had to be much more aggressive. I had to take more risks. But those risks were tolerated, right?
Yeah.
And then, I've had a couple that it was pretty much just me choosing. And, that's where you really, there's no one else to blame if it doesn't work, right? And I was in one of them, I was very aggressive, probably too aggressive. And the other one, I probably was a little light on it.
Yeah.
And I think it also depends on the style of how you're going to sell and market, right? I tend to do a lot of in-person stuff, a lot of networking. I do a lot of public speaking. So, that's a little bit different style than if you want to go more to the social media or website, inbound, outbound type stuff.
Yeah.
Versus, or we're going to go traditional advertising, radio, TV, even print, things like that. And so, understanding your industry, understanding what your business will tolerate, and try not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
If people in your industry have found success doing it, I probably would try that first.
Yeah.
I'll give you another kind of tidbit when it comes to like sales and marketing is each industry has kind of a norm on a percentage of revenue that they spend on it.
Yeah.
So the business that Sarah Brenna's in, typically you're going to spend 6% of revenue on marketing and about 6% of revenue on sales. So your sales and marketing effort should be roughly 12%. And what I have found is that when I was spending 8% instead of 12, we were growing at 10%. And I want to grow at 20 to 25% a year. And if I'm spending 12 to 15% of revenue on sales and marketing, and we are not growing at 20 or 25%, something's not effective.
Yeah, something's off.
Right. So I try to do it by the numbers, and I try not to be the smart guy. I try to be the guy who says, wait a minute, Bob, started doing whatever LinkedIn ads, and he saw this kind of return. So let's go do LinkedIn ads and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
I really like one of the first things you said was just, we need to understand what the business values. And I think that is such an easy thing to overlook. But, one of my mentors said, when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. And that always stuck with me. And I think that's appropriate here as well, right? When you know what the business values, the decisions that you need to make do become easy. Like, what do we need to focus on? Well, what do we value? Right. So I love that. Now I want to dig into Sarah Bryn a little bit, because you bought Sarah Bryn a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When you did that, what attributes made the company attractive for you?
And Sarah Bryn's a little bit of an odd duck. So I got a call from a friend of mine, and he's in the mergers and acquisition space. He does a lot of valuations. He calls and he says, Jeff, I've got this business. It's in Virginia. You're about the only guy I can think of that actually understands what they do. And, it's just a weird fit, because they had a heavy cybersecurity practice, which there's lots of people who do cybersecurity.
Yeah.
But they also had a very deep compliance practice. And, so yes, you see those together, but not in the same way that they were doing it. And so, certain people wanted to buy the cyber side, but they didn't really want the compliance side. And certain people wanted the compliance side, but they didn't want the cyber side. And so when he told me about it, I was like, that's an odd duck. I'm not sure what I think about that.
Yeah.
And he's a super smart guy. And he said, I think it's an advantage. And I started looking at it through that lens, started doing my normal, evaluations when you're looking at a merger or an acquisition. And ultimately their client base and their reputation, the brand that they had built, was exceptional. And so even though the financial performance wasn't there, but the possibilities were really good.
So you saw opportunities to take advantage of within the existing business.
I did. And I'll give you a couple of them. One, Sarah Bryn had a really, really impressive client list. I mean, literally the White House, Office of Management and Budget, some of the Ivy Leagues, Princeton and so forth, several universities, states, airports, massive international companies. They had clients way above their size.
Yeah.
And, close to 700 to 900 of them. So a lot of clients over the last 15 years. So there's a lot to work with there. On top of the fact that they were really good at what they did, which gave them a great reputation. One of the things that I think they didn't do, and they acknowledged it, the guys who started it were still friends, and we talk, and they just said, look, we didn't really have a good recurring revenue model. We did everything as they'd land a whale, they would work on that, and then it'd be starvation, and they'd land a whale, and so it was feast or famine.
So it was all project-based work.
It was all project-based work, and but I come from the recurring revenue world.
Yeah.
Because the fastest way you can go out of business is in the project business.
Yeah.
Because it's not consistent, and when things get hard, it's one of the first things people turn off. So I saw a big opportunity with the fundamental product and services they were selling, and the go-to-market strategy. And so that was very attractive. Number two, when you have a client base like they had, a lot of people overlook that.
Yeah.
But going back to those clients and saying, okay, we did this for you. You really liked the outcome. And and the former owners, people would ask them to do things that were recurring, and they said, we just don't do that. And so, when I was buying the business, they were like, Jeff, yeah, all the stuff you're talking about you want to do, they've been asking us to do that for a while. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Good sign. And so, yeah, there were the bones. If you're looking at a house, obviously it has good bones.
Yeah.
Florida Brand had great bones.
Yeah.
All it needed was and the other thing that happened for the prior owners, they had built a cybersecurity product, piece of software, and they really wanted to focus on that. So, and they had really turned all their attention to it. So the services side was selling that was a way to fund accelerating their product.
Got it.
Right. So it was really a win-win in the fact that, now they were doing really well with that product. And now that I've gotten the services side, which is my bread and butter, we've seen, astronomical growth.
Yeah. So did the previous owners go off and focus on the product side of it?
They did.
Got it.
So they took the product, and I bought all of the services, the employees, the brand, and all that. And the product had its own brand, and so they went off and focused on that, and that's been successful for them.
I want to break a couple things down here because I think there's some huge learning lessons here. One, starting to shift from project-based to recurring. Tell me what that process was like. Like how did you end up shifting to more recurring? Like what was?
Yeah, the first 6 months, I didn't have the answer yet. I knew what we did. I knew how we did it. We had a lot of projects in the pipeline, so we were finishing those as well. And I was crafting different service offerings that would try to satisfy the needs of what clients were looking for, but not have to try to all do it in 2 months, right?
Yeah.
And what I found in the process was the way we were doing it wasn't working anyway. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody calls us and says, we need to get ISO 27001 compliant. That doesn't mean anything to you, but it means we need to get a certification.
Okay.
So in the old days, they would go in for 2 or 3 months. It'd be a pretty big project, be $100,000 or, $150,000.
Yeah.
And they do a whole bunch of work. They would hand it over to the client. And then 6 months later, the client would call back and say, okay, what do we do next? We haven't really done anything since y'all left. And so even though they did really quality work, sometimes the client doesn't know where to take it. So I started thinking about that. Well, what if I just took that work and I spread it out over 6 months or 12 months? And we started making that more of we're going to do this by the drink as opposed to by the gallon or bucket.
Yeah.
Well, number one, the client could consume it better. They could bring it into the business and operationalize it better. They were starting to participate in a different way. The clients were.
So they were more involved in the process.
They were more involved, and they weren't overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of them don't know what this is. And so we just slowed it down and we spread it out, and we built in some anchoring, some reinforcement so that it would stick. And instead of it being kind of a one-time thing, it turned into the way they operate going forward. So it had a much better outcome.
Yeah.
It was easier to pay for because, am I going to write a check for $100,000, or am I going to pay, $10,000 or $15,000 a month for 12 months?
Yeah.
Right. So it's easier on the pocketbook and cash flow. And they like the results. On my side, I didn't have the bottleneck of humans. So as on the resources side, so everybody liked it better. Like in all ways, it was better.
Yeah.
And there really wasn't a big negative, other than yes, it's nice to get a big check up front.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. So a lot of it was just studying, analyzing the problem, really listening to what the clients were trying to do and what they wanted.
Yeah.
And then finding a way to give that to them in a way that was sustainable and healthy for our business.
Yeah. You're doing the same thing, but you repackaged it in a way that's better for them and a way that they want to buy.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Now, do you find at the end of, say, a 12-month, do you have a follow-up to that? Like, is there more ongoing support, advisory that tends to roll into for more recurring?
It does. And so what we find is roughly 90% of clients just keep going. And the reason is a lot of what we do, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's the compliance side, that's not an event. That is
it's an ongoing activity.
It's a function. It's like saying, I'm going to do my website once and I'm never going to touch it again.
Yeah, right.
that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
You're going to make updates to that website forever.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's monthly, but you're making changes to that website for the rest of time.
Yeah.
Well, cyber is no different. I mean, even if we put a lot of these things in place, they have to be monitored. They have to be, things have to be remediated. There's reporting that has to happen. Compliance is there's even more, care and feeding.
Yeah. And
it's not that some of these clients couldn't do it in-house. They don't want to. It's not their core business.
Yeah.
They rather outsource it because, it's kind of like, can I do my own surgery? Well, I probably could, but it's better if a surgeon does it. Right?
Yeah.
And so, it's what we find is that it's the value for the client is there. And so, I've had people, I call them and say, hey, we're a couple of months away from the end of your contract here, or we call it agreements, not a contract. I don't like the contract word. And I mean, I've had one, she goes, don't you dare stop that. I will, Jeff, I will come find you. Right.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is fantastic. And we've been working on this for years, and we finally have a program that works.
Yeah.
Don't touch it. I was like, yes, ma'am.
Okay. There you go.
I'm right there. I got you. So, but your original question of how do you change your business model, right? Because that's how you sell it. That's how your agreements are written.
Yeah.
It's how you bill for it. And collect for it. It's how your operational, your resources, the way they deliver services all changes all your templates and your intellectual property. So it's not a small change.
No. But it's from what I'm hearing from you though, is that the clients don't know enough about how this stuff is actually being implemented. So if you approach it as, hey, we can get this done in 3 months, or, hey, this is how we set this up. It's a year agreement, and we're going to take this in bite-sized chunks and just continue to work through these things according to this timeline. however you present that, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, that's how you got to do it. Right. And by presenting it as a longer term deal, and you're going to just continually make progress month after month, it's more bite-sized, right? It's like you said, it's easier for them to, some of their people can get indoctrinated in it so that they feel comfortable with at least knowing what's going on. But it also gets them used to paying monthly so that at the end of the agreement, it's like, hey, do you want to continue to work on this?
It's in the budget.
Yes, we do. Right?
Yeah, because, whether you're using a CapEx or an OpEx, I mean, you'll get a big chunk of change that's only happening one time, and you got to get a bunch of approvals. But for somebody to sign up for $5 or $10 a month as an operating expense, once it's in the budget, you get used to it and you get the value from it, so you leave it.
Yeah.
You had just said something, and I lost it now. But you had hit on
if it comes back to you, just
I know what it was. I know what it was. The other thing that I think people forget is the change threshold. There's a threshold of how much change an organization can absorb.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you do a big project all at once, and I think this is true for most of the service functions in a business. So accounting, finance, marketing, legal, IT, security.
Yeah.
Yes, you can, somebody hires you to come in and do a big marketing project, and they want a new website, and they want all new collateral, and they want new talking points, and they want videos, and they want all this stuff. And they say you got 3 months to make it happen. That's a lot of resources, and they can't absorb that anyway.
No.
You're not going to do that with any quality.
No.
But if you say, look, we're going to turn this into a monthly program, and first month we're going to focus on the website. Second month we're going to focus on social. Third month we're going to get videos. Just however it lays out.
Yeah.
It's much more likely to, number one, be good quality, but it's also much more likely for them to operationalize it.
Yeah. Otherwise, they can't absorb it that fast.
Even when they think they can and they want to, they can't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We have a cadence. We meet with the clients once a week. It's not like, hey, we're going to meet 3 times 1 week in a month. It is at least 1 or 2 meetings a week. So at the end of 52 weeks, it's 50 to 100 meetings, and that constant. And there's a lot of a lot of metrics.
Yeah.
To be sure we're on track and we're keeping pace, and then when things are starting to fall off, we hit it hard with a Tiger team. Figure out what the roadblock is. Let's get them back on track and let's keep them moving.
Yeah.
And it's super effective.
How did you? Once you figured out, hey, we need to shift to this type of agreement. You had mentioned, Sarah Brent had 700 to 900 clients. You got a lot of past clients there. How did you go about approaching them now with this different offer? What was that like?
Well, the good news is a lot of them were just calling us. Like I said, if you do a really good job, they remember you, and almost always they would call and say, hey, I had this consultant, and it was Heather or Colin or whoever, and that have been long gone. They were great. Do you guys still do this? Yes.
So they had a new need that had come up.
A lot of new
and they're
needs.
Reaching back out.
Yeah, and then the other thing we did is we started to do specific campaigns based on current events in the cyber and compliance world.
Yeah.
Right now, there is the Department of Defense has been pushing out a cybersecurity requirement for about 4 years. And it's been long and arduous, but December 14th, it becomes law. So, when we were talking to people 2 or 3 years ago about it, people were like, let me know when this gets more real, right?
Yeah.
Or if this actually becomes a law.
Yeah.
And then now, because it's imminent, you can start good campaigns. And then, you know this because you're a marketer. It's a lot different when somebody reaches out to you and they know you, they know the name, they trust you, versus somebody calling you cold.
Yeah.
Our business is a trust sale.
Yeah.
By 100 miles, I try to explain this to people. If you're going to go buy a copier, you're going to go buy a telephone. If you make a mistake, you throw it away, you get a different one.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's a little painful. You don't pick a cybersecurity firm and think, it doesn't work out, I'll try somebody else.
Yeah.
Because if we mess up, we put them out of business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything that we do is about that customer has to fully trust us. And so that sale is all about credibility and trust, reputation, and testimonials and things like that. So when you've got a good reputation in the past, that half the battle's gone. More than half the battle is won.
But so the ones that weren't approaching you, it was a matter of reaching out to them with really hyper relevant information to say, hey, this is coming up. Have you addressed it? If not,
Right.
Are you interested in having a chat with you about it?
One of the biggest mistakes, one of the other things that I do is I coach a lot of business owners. I probably have, 50, 75 business owners that I meet with either weekly or monthly in groups. They're in groups. But one of the biggest problems that I fundamentally see in whether it's sales or marketing, it happens on both sides. People want to talk about them. People want to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
As opposed to the customer.
Yeah.
Reaching out to the old customers or the former clients and saying, hey, this is what we do now. This is the things we have to offer. That's a good thing. But what they really want to know is what they care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can talk about things that impact them, that's much more effective than calling and saying, hey, by the way, guess what we do?
Yeah.
Right. And so I see that as a rampant problem, and can't tell you how many times, we'll be going through somebody's pitch deck and it's us, me, look, us. Yeah. It's just constantly look at me. Let me show you how good we are. Yeah. Let me show you about how great the service is. And if the client doesn't have a need, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I think about it is, they don't care about us. They care about what we can do for them, right? How can we help them get from where they are to where they want to be? And you're so right. You got to pick the industry. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. Go to 5 websites. They all say the same thing. A lot of messaging about the company and not focusing on the client. So there's the good news is there's a lot of opportunity there for the right companies to take advantage of that.
Sure. 100%.
So, yeah, I love it. I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap things up. I want to talk about speaking, because I know speaking can be in the B2B space. I think it is a phenomenal way to get out there and market, but not a lot of people do it. Can you share with us just a little bit about your experience with that?
I can. I got into speaking sort of by chance. And I enjoy doing it. It comes very naturally for me. Not everybody that's the case, and it's not their thing. But I had an industry, kind of one of the largest industry organizations in my industry. And they had a need for some speakers, and I got recommended. And so I just said, well, I'll talk to you about it. I've got a couple of businesses I'm running. It's not like I've got a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah.
And the woman who runs it is just, she's amazing dynamo, just a absolute dynamo. And so we hit it off immediately. Just mental. We just, half the time I think I can finish her sentences, and she's just smart. And so, and that was really how it started. And then once you start doing it, well, other people notice you or they see you do it and they say, hey, can you come speak for us? Or would you come talk, give that talk? And the next thing you know, I mean, I'm running all over the country, and, I probably am speaking 1 or 2 times a month.
Yeah.
And even to the point that it got so much that I had to back it off. I felt like I wasn't giving enough attention to the businesses, even though they have leadership teams that can run them.
Yeah.
And, but the exposure we got from it, and I can tell you, I almost never know how it's going to benefit us. I just
do it.
And somehow, some way, every time. I mean, it's every time.
Yeah.
And I've had people, it's a year and a half later. Jeff, I saw you speak in Orlando and you were talking about X, Y, and Z. And, we just had a change in our business. And that really, first thing came to my mind is what you said about that. And I called you a year and a half later.
Yeah.
So when you're planting those seeds, the other thing I think people do when they're speaking is I don't think they understand that sometimes it takes a long time for those seeds to grow.
Yeah.
And so don't just discourage, just keep putting it out there. Put out good content, know what you're talking about, be credible. You got to have some personality, right? Yeah. So there's got to be something real there for people to latch onto. And, but it has really, really worked out for us in my businesses. And, so when things work, you
keep doing it.
You keep doing it. The other one I will say about speaking is I think people feel like if it's not a certain size, it doesn't matter. I've had talks with people, 12 people in a room, just a local kind of a thing. Or I've gone to talk to a small entrepreneur forum group, right? Size doesn't really matter. It's the quality of the audience.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
And of that group that I'm talking about, 11 or 12 people, I got 2 clients out of it.
Yeah. You, in most cases, are you speaking for free, or are they paying you some type of stipend?
I was early on.
Okay.
Not anymore. Now.
Yeah. So now it's gotten to the point where you're getting paid for it.
Yeah, I get paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so that part is nice, but I still will do. I had one come up, and it's a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And it was probably 800 people in that room, and I didn't charge them. Then they paid for my travel.
Yeah.
But I didn't charge them for that. And I was just fine with that. That's a lot of exposure for, 6 hours of my time.
It's again, it's going back to that long-term. You got to think long-term about it. But just because you're not being paid for it, just go in with that long-term, help people. And like you said, in a business, look, in B2B, it is very trust-based. Getting in front of an audience is one of the best ways. You have instant credibility when you do that. And so it helps build trust, I think, that much faster.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people are, they don't like to speak. They have fears around it. But gosh, if you can push through that fear, the opportunities that you will generate from speaking, it is, I think it's one of the best things to do.
100%. And it's the reason you just said, which is if you can get up on stage and you talk about something, you probably know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Because, especially if you do a lot of question and answer, I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
You better know your stuff. Right.
Yeah. If you're doing Q&A, that shows people, okay, this is not prepared.
Yeah.
he or she knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
A few years ago, I did about, I don't know, I probably did 100 radio shows in a matter of a month. And we were doing live Q&A. So when you're on the radio and you're doing live Q&A, I mean, there's no safety net. No.
No.
Zilch. And it's so, I mean, and that's, after you do that, there's just no fear. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what's going to scare you after that?
Yeah. No.
And, I that's what cut my teeth. But I think the other thing you said, let's say that you're not comfortable and maybe you don't have, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'7". I've got a big personality. I'm from Texas and I've got all kinds of, sayings that or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I've got a natural buffoonery about me that I get to mix in with it, and it works for me. But let's say you don't. The other thing that works is panels.
Mm-hmm.
Being an expert on a panel where you're one of 3 or 4 people and you've got an area that you're talking about, those are just as effective, And so, and I think that's another way where you're not just, it's not quite so intimidating to have to come up with an hour or 2 hours worth of material, all of the graphics and
Yeah.
production. And, when you really start doing it professionally, you've got to have introductions and you've got to have all of your collateral because it's a small business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't worry about all that stuff. Do a few panels. Start small, get comfortable, find a topic that resonates. I talk on all kinds of stuff. I talk on AI. I talk on China. I talk on cyber. I talk on how to run a business. I talk on M&A, all that stuff. But the highest thing that the highest rated speech I talk about is what it's like to go through a serious ransomware attack. So I literally start from the minute it hits and all the way through day 60. And I mean, that one is, I've had people come up to me crying afterwards and so if you find something that really works and resonates and it's a subject people want to hear about, you'll have plenty of opportunities to get out there and talk about it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you touched on too is so important for people to think about too, is the more you do this, the more comfortable you're going to get. 100%. We all suck in the beginning.
Sure.
It's totally okay. Just start doing it and you're going to get better and better and better. And you're going to get more and more comfortable. And then, however much down the road, you're going to go, gosh, what was I worried about?
Right. Well, and it's true. And the other thing is nowadays with the cost of equipment, I mean, you can use your iPhone, you can use lots of things. You can record yourself multiple times doing it.
Yeah.
And, self coaching, I'm not going to call it self-criticism, self-coaching, when you're not used to this, works just fine. And then you get a small group of people that you trust that are going to give you the brutal truth. Don't take it personally. If they tell you fidget too much, sometimes I talk with my hands all over the place.
Yeah.
Learn to settle it down.
Yeah.
Right. And, ultimately it's about, don't let what's the whole saying? Don't let perfection get in the way of great.
Yeah.
None of my speeches are perfect. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure if any of them are that great, but they're effective. Right?
Yeah.
So what's the objective? Is the objective to really get up there and look great, or is the objective to actually get more business?
Yeah.
And for me, it's about getting more business and getting customers and getting exposure.
Yeah.
The rest of it's whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, this has been great, man. You and I could talk for a long time. I want to ask you one last thing, which is knowing what you know now, is there anything you do different?
Knowing there'd be a bunch of stuff I do different. The first private equity company I worked for, I would not have done the second one, right? Because if you haven't worked for private equity as a CEO and partial owner, that's a special kind of pressure. all this hair is gray and white because of
that.
Yeah, I'd have done it once because I learned a lot, but I wouldn't have done it twice.
Yeah.
I think the real answer to that for me is, for a long time, I ran companies for other people until I actually started owning them for myself. I would have changed that and done it much sooner. I would have been much more aggressive about learning how to raise money. If you don't naturally have, the capital, I would have learned that sooner, because it's really easy to get funded if you work hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have started way sooner. That's really, if I had to pick one thing for people to, if you're not sure, I would have done that. I'd have done it 15 years earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Jeff, where can people connect and learn more about you?
I see it scrolling across the screen there. So sarahbrand.com is the website. Bunch of good stuff out there. And then my LinkedIn, please reach out, connect. I try to pay close attention to that. I have an admin who helps me pay attention to that. So I try to be responsive.
Cool.
And, but those would be good ones and I'd love to talk to people.
Cool. We'll make sure. So sarahbrand.com, and then on LinkedIn, it's JFar with 2 R's, 1. We'll make sure that both of those get in the show notes so you can connect with Jeff. But man, I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your journey. There was a ton of good stuff in there. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Those of you that are watching, listening, appreciate you doing so. If you want to connect with us, you can do that over at rialtomarketing.com. The other tool I've got for you is over at revenueroadblockscorecard.com. If you want to know which of the 9 roadblocks are slowing down your growth, that's where you can do it. So go check it out. And until next time, take care.